Good morning. Very excited today. I've been playing with the new Eden's Garden stamp set, and I made this card, and it's very easy, but I just really think it came out pretty. So I was watching YouTube, as I do often, and there was um, a, a video by a woman, Lavinia Stamps is her tag name, and she did this kind of a semicircular background, and I thought that it would lend itself really nicely to this set. So that's what we're going to do. So you just need, your card base, 8.5 by 5.5. You need a piece of white, and that's 4 by 5.25, and that's it for the front of the card. All right, so I took just a piece of scrap paper and cut a circle. Now, if you don't have dies, you could use a punch. You could use, you could draw a circle. Put down like a thing of ribbon or something and draw the circle and cut it out on your own. Because I know some people don't have a die cutter, but you could cut one on a Cricut if you have a Cricut. But I cut this piece of paper the same size as my front mat, so it is 4 by 5.25, because I wanted it to fit exactly so that I knew where I was going to be able to place my template. Also, if you watched me before, when I'm sponging color or something, I tend to get it on the other side. So doing it this way, I won't be getting ink outside of the circle. So I'm using one of the blender brushes for this. You could, of course, use a regular sponge, whatever you have. And I'm going to ink my circle with the Soft Succulent. And you want to start on this side. And as she said, you're only going to ink about 2/3 of the circle. And I think that really kind of makes it, rather than, doing the whole thing around as I normally would have done. So if you put some ink on here, start off of the thing and then just bring your brush on. Doesn't take much. I'm just going around the edges from, about up here around to about right there. I'm starting off just because, sometimes if you start on here, when you lay it down, you get that initial mark. So if you start off of the paper, okay, and that's about it. It doesn't look like much until you take off the mask. Just put this over to the side. I'm going to leave that open because I'm going to stamp with that next. Okay, so when I take off my mask, you can see it leaves quite a bit of color. What I've got right there. There we go. All right. Right, and then that's going to give you your pattern for where you want to put your stamps. So I used 2 of these. I'll do this one first. And I wanted to mix and match the 2 stamps and the 2 colors. So I took this one, and that would be here, this one. I used these 2. Just because they were a little smaller, I didn't want it to get too big. And I'm going to start. So I'm getting a little bit of a shadow right there, like that. All right, so then I'll start here. And I'm leaving room in between to stamp my other one. Now there I got a little bit of a shadow. Oh gosh, I hate that when it happens. You just get, sometimes the ink pads are so juicy. And I'll show you what I'm going to do with that in just a minute. So there's that one. Then I'm going to take my second stamp, clean that off, and I'm going to use the darker, the Evening Evergreen, just because I wanted a little bit of contrast with the color. And of course I have the Evening Evergreen as the base, card base in there. You could use any colors you want, any green. You could use a green and a blue. You know, it doesn't have to be two greens. I just really like the way that looked. All right, so that one's doing better. Still getting that ink around the edge, but okay, so for this one then, I turned it and went the other way so that I'm not going to end up with a stem sticking out here. And I just went around where I left the space in between. And I'm stamping this one, going the opposite way. These are some of those distinctive stamps where you get the lighter and darker in there. Okay, so then that gives me, I might want to come up here. Let's do one more up here. I wanted it to come around just a little bit more. There we go. Okay. Oh, I'll get this out, and then I'm going to stamp my greeting. This one has just some beautiful ones. This dear friend, how are you? Be a great one to send. You know, the last 2 years have been hard on a lot of people. I'm going to stamp that right here. So you want to stamp something in this open area. Okay. All right. So what do you think? I mean, that took me like no time at all. And I just think it looks beautiful. All right. So then what I typically do is if I wind up with a couple of these little shadows, that's where I'm going to put my jewels. So you could use sequins, you can use rhinestones, but I'm going to use some of the garden gems. I used the smaller ones on this one, but I think I'm going to use these teardrops here just to see what that looks like. They're really pretty, and they give a lot of like a holographic color. So I always like to use my take pick tool to pick this up. All right, so let me see. I'm going to put that one right there. Put it right here. Usually, you know, you like to use odd numbers. I'm just going to use 3. All right, so then that gives my card front a little bit of bling. I do still have a little bit of a mark there. And if that bothers you, you can use one of these sand erasers. And often that will take off. I'll work on that off camera, but these sand erasers, if you'll go over it, will often take off those little boo-boos that happen. All right, so then on the inside, I wanted to use a piece of the designer paper because it's so pretty. But then I just put the piece of white over the top. So let's go ahead and we'll finish this one. You can see this makes a really quick card. You could do a different shape if you wanted, a square or a rectangle. I would again just do, she said 2/3, you know, 2/3 of it, or 3/4, or 3/4 of it. Put this on the front. I'll put that up in a minute. And then on the inside, this time instead of using this side of the paper, I'm going to use this side. Isn't that beautiful? I just love this paper. This kind of a splatter really looks nice. And then I'll stamp my words here, which is my heart is tied to yours. Tug if you need anything. Make sure I don't stamp it upside down. Although since I haven't attached it yet, it would be okay because I could just turn it over. Just around the edges here. I trim my stamps a little, try to trim them a little bit closer so I don't get so much of those edge, but sometimes there's nothing you can do. There we go. All right. So now I'll finish putting this card together. I think that you could, got ink on my fingers, so I want to be careful. I think you could use anything. It doesn't have to be greenery. You know, if you wanted to come around it with, I don't know, fish or shells or, you know, anything that you could stamp around. They have to be a little bit on the smaller side. See, I think I got an ink smudge there too. So just a reminder to be careful. You've got the ink on your fingers, as I do. So there we have the dear friend, how are you? And then my heart is tied to yours. Tug if you need anything. I just really like that card. So, you know, the two different kinds of garden gems I used, but you saw how just it was quick and easy. So I hope you have a wonderful day and that you try making one of these cards.